What's up guys, so for today's video I'm going to be giving you the basic lowdown on how to optimize Tarkov and all the findings and research that I personally done and what's worked for me. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. So for the first part of this video, I'm going to be showing you guys my launcher and in-game settings. These are easily one of the two most important parts of this process, so yeah, let's get into it. So the launcher settings is super simple. Just open up the game, go to settings, basically copy everything that I have here. This isn't super important, but definitely helps. Having the launcher open while the game's running can sometimes cause stutters. So yeah, just go through, make sure it's set to, that's turned off, and make sure when I close the launch window, it exits the launcher, and when I launch the game, it exits the launcher completely. I like to have these two ticked, that's optional as well. I also recommend going through here where it says temp directory, just press clean temp, it cleans out some of the temp files, gets it nice and cleared out. So yeah, that's all you need to do here. Also, just recommend going here and clicking clear cache, and also while you're at it, doing an integrity check. Basically what that does is make sure there's no conflicting files or basically bugged out files on your actual install. So I'd recommend going ahead and doing that. Alright, for the Nvidia drivers, the first thing we want to do is we want to go ahead and download the Nvidia driver. I linked in the description below. It's a 442.74. I've tested like 6 different driver versions, all the way from older ones like 441.41 all the way to the newer ones, and this one just seems like the best performing one in terms of frames, performance, stability, and latency. And this one is not only good for Tarkov, but it's great for games like Valorant or any of the other FPSs or games that you might play. This is just a very universally good driver that I found. So make sure you go ahead and download it. Next thing you want to do is want to make sure you have a unzipping program like 7-zip or WinRAR installed, because we're going to be going ahead and modifying some of these files to get you basically better performance and more of a stripped driver experience. So let's get into it. So first thing you want to do is you want to drag it to your desktop or wherever you have it. Basically want to right click it, and you basically want to extract files, press OK, and it's going to go ahead and extract all your files to your desktop or wherever you have it placed. Because basically what we're going to be going through is we're going to be going ahead and stripping out all the telemetry and the backend files here that are unnecessary and cause actual physical latency issues with your game. And just do note that if you do this, you're not going to have access to GeForce Experience or any of the like other overlays like Shadowplay. That's not going to be able to be installed. So if you need those software, just skip the step. However, I would highly recommend doing it. Basically, go ahead and do it. You want to basically press Control A, highlight everything, and you want to deselect a couple of these things. Deselect GeForce Experience, display.driver, NV12, and all these down here. Everything else, go ahead and delete. Basically, just make sure you have these. These are the core files that you need to actually go through the installer. The reason we have GeForce Experience is that the installer won't actually let you install it without that folder being there. You're not actually installing GeForce Experience though, so don't worry about that. So once you have all these here, the next thing you want to do is you want to install a piece of software, have an description called DDU or Display Driver Uninstaller. Basically, what we're going to go ahead and do is do a full clean uninstall of the Nvidia drivers, so you have nice, clean, fresh install. This is super important, as if you just go ahead and do it through the traditional setup, you won't actually be able to get the proper fresh install, as the Nvidia drivers don't do a very good job at cleaning up older files, and that can leave conflicting shaders, and that can cause stuttering in all your games, not just Tarkov. So yeah, anyways, to go ahead and do that, make sure you have it installed. I personally have it on your Windows Start thing, so make sure you have it somewhere accessible. So what you want to do is you want to press the Windows key and R, type in MS config, go to the boot section, click on Safe Boot, click Apply, press OK. Make sure you click Exit without restart. Do know that when doing this, we're going to be restarting into Safe Boot, so make sure you know what your Windows password is. I got into an issue where I actually did Safe Boot, and I didn't know what my Windows password was, and it conflicted. So I was basically locked out of my Windows operating system, and I had to do a fresh install. So just make sure you know what your Windows password is, and don't be a retard like me. Otherwise, you're going to have to do a complete reinstall of your Windows, and it's not going to be a fun time. So anyways, go ahead and restart your computer, and you should be in safe mode. I'll be showing you guys how to go from there. Okay, so the next portion of this video is going to be recorded on my phone, because there's no way I actually natively record in safe mode, so sorry for the shitter quality. Basically, what you want to go do is once you're in safe mode, go to wherever you install DDU, double click it, let it load up, gives you a prompt when you first install it, just let it run through its process. Go to select device type, click GPU, make sure it's on Nvidia, assuming you have an Nvidia card that is. Press clean and do not restart, it'll go through. Clean out all your old driver files. Super simple, just let it do its thing, and then once it's done, exit out. Go back to MS config by typing Windows R key and MS config. Basically, go back to your boot section and make sure Safe Boot is unticked. Yeah, it's pretty much all I have to do. Now you should have a fresh uninstalled driver. So yeah, once you're done doing that, just restart your computer, super simple. Also, I'd highly recommend you unplugging your Ethernet cable once you're installing your new drivers, as Windows sometimes likes to install their own driver version when you use DDU and uninstall it. So just make sure you unplug your Ethernet cable when you're going on to this next step. So yeah, I'll see you guys there. So the next step, basically all you do is navigate to where you have your uninstalled Nvidia drivers. So the 442.74, basically go through the setup. Super simple. If you've installed Nvidia drivers, you do the same thing you do every other time. Go through, let it set up. Should install just fine. Once you do that, exit out of here. There's another piece of software I'm going to have you download in the description below. It's called Msi Mode. Just navigate to wherever you have that installed. Personally, I have it in my Windows directory, so click up the MSI software. Basically, in layman's terms, what the software does, it basically puts your Nvidia drivers into a more streamlined process of communication between your actual motherboard, Windows, and your graphics card. It's much more complicated than that, but basically, the only reason that this isn't on by default is that Nvidia likes to support old legacy hardware, which nobody uses anymore. I'm pretty sure AMD has on by default. And as you can see, other drivers have on by default. This basically gives you better increase in, or decrease, my bad, in overall system latency, and especially for your drivers, it does a huge difference in my experience. Basically makes everything feel more snappy and responsive. For the time being, all you do is open the software, click the MSI mode button, make sure an interrupt priority is set to high, click apply, and restart your computer. That's literally all you have to do. Make sure you do not mess with any of these other drivers in here. Do not press them in MSI mode or do anything, as this can cause blue screens and cause other issues. And it's just not going to be a good time. So make sure you only mess with this NVIDIA setting here, and you should be okay. So once that's done, we're going to navigate to the actual NVIDIA settings here, and we're going to go through and show you basically what I have set and what I recommend you have set. So right click on your desktop, go to NVIDIA control panel. We're going to start from the bottom up and go through each of the settings. So all this is personal preference, but a lot of this is objectively good for your computer. So just go through and copy what I have. Basically for this first portion is the video section. I use this on the use NVIDIA setting. Doesn't make much of a difference. Make sure you have use inverse telecine on. Basically decreases stuttering while watching, like, say, YouTube videos or Twitch. Adjust video color settings. Do this for both your monitors. Accidentally forgot to put this on full, which by default it's on partial color mode, which means you're not seeing the full range of colors in a monitor. So yeah, just go through, make sure you have both your monitors, assuming you have more than one, to use with NVIDIA settings. Set this full, and you should be good on this tab. Don't need to worry about this. For setup G-Sync, if you have G-Sync, make sure this is ticked. Press apply down here. That'll activate G-Sync on your monitor, assuming you have it. If you don't have it, you don't have this tab, so don't need to worry about it. You can skip, this one's pretty important. This tab's pretty important. Basically, when you go through, make sure for both of your monitors, you have it set to no scaling. Basically, scaling increases latency, like by far, especially if you don't have a display-based scaler. Basically, what scaling is when you play a game at a lower resolution than your monitor's default, it actually scales the game up to your entire monitor, but this causes input lag and latency, especially if you don't have a display-based scaler, which most monitors don't. So I'd recommend just turning this off. Basically decreases overall system latency, and that can cause issues. However, if you do play games like Valorant or CS and you play them in 4x3, note that you will not be able to do this. So if you do play games like CS alongside of Tarkov, you can just set this to full screen mode up here, and make sure if you have performance scaling on, make sure you set it to the display-based one. This monitor does not have a display-based scaler. This one does. This one basically makes it so you have lower input lag, so please make sure it's on display-based. You do not need to click the override scaling mode. This usually does it just fine. So that's all I have to do for this tab. You can skip these two and this one. This basically just means if you have your monitor on, say, portrait mode, just make sure it's selected on portrait, and it should be okay. I have mine both on landscape. So for the just desktop color settings, this is pretty important. So both your monitors, set them to use NVIDIA settings. Make sure you can turn up digital vibrance. All this does like increase your monitor saturation. I leave it at like default or slightly above default. It's good for games like Tarkov that are super dull, or games like CS. Basically increase saturation, makes it easier to spot people. Personal preference. Just make sure it's set like this though, if you want to copy my settings. So if your monitors, make sure they're set to their native resolution. If you go any lower than this, that can cause input lag and a lot of other issues. Make sure your refresh rate is set at its maximum rate. because a lot of people forget to turn it all the way up, and they're actually, like, some people buy like 144 hertz monitors and forget to change it, so they're running 60 hertz on a 144 hertz monitor, and that fucks a lot of people. So make sure you have that at your baseline refresh rate. And for your monitors, make sure you have use NVIDIA color settings, and make sure your output dynamic range is set to full. By default, it's unlimited, and that limits your color gamut range, which looks like shit on default, so make sure that's on full. Next thing you want to do is you're going to click on desktop, and make sure you click enable developer settings. This is going to bring up this context menu. Make sure you click on allow access to the GPU performance counters to all users, and press apply. It's on your screen's going to flash black a couple times. This decreases latency from what I found. This setting is completely optional. I personally found it decreases latency by a little bit. Basically what this does is allow all the users on your computer to access GPU performance counters. It's kind of complicated, but it helps slightly. It's completely optional. You don't necessarily do this. So for this tab, for the physics tab, set it to whatever your GPU is. It's by default, it's usually on your CPU. Make sure it's on your GPU. The next thing I'm gonna go do is go through my program specific 3D settings. So you're gonna go to program settings. Make sure you find escape from Tarkov, and you can go through and copy what I have. Image sharpening, this is personal preference. This basically limits the sharpening effect. I find it personally super annoying. This decreases it by a little bit and makes the game look better, in my opinion. Optional. So yeah, just go through and just copy everything I have. Most of these settings of the game overrides anyways. They don't make a huge amount of difference, but some of them do. For example, low latency mode, make sure it's set to on or ultra. You can experiment which works better for you. If you have a G-Sync monitor, set this to ultra. If you don't, set it to on. Basically what this does is decrease the amount of frames created in your buffer. And if you have this to off, it'll be by default set to like 3, and that causes like 50 or 60 milliseconds of input lag, and this is fucking horrible. So make sure that's on or on ultra. The reason I say to set to ultra if you have a G-Sync monitor, battle no nonsense, that basically a super in-depth explanation of this. Basically, with G-Sync, you need to make sure you have V-Sync on, otherwise G-Sync doesn't work properly, and ultra low latency basically decreases the overall input lag with those options selected. So yeah, just keep that in mind. For monitor technology, I have it set to G-Sync. Opening rendering GL, make sure it's set to 1080 Ti. Power management mode, make sure it's set to prefer maximum performance. This will give you single-handedly like a 20% performance boost by far, because by default this is set on to adaptive, and that's basically a setting meant for laptops. But please make sure it's on for maximum performance, as this will give you a huge performance boost. For refresh rate, highest available. Go ahead and copy all my texture filtering settings. These give you a slight 1% performance difference. It's not that big of a deal. The two most important settings here are triple buffering. Make sure that's off. Basically, that just creates more buffer frames, which means more input lag, which means bad. Basically, you want to make sure that's off. Vertical sync, make sure that's off as well, as you enable that in game already. And when you do it like this, it actually uncaps your Tarkov frame rate, so you can go above the 60 FPS and 120 FPS in-game FPS cap. So it'll completely uncap your frames from now on. The next portion of this video, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to cap your in-game FPS. So there's two main ways I'd recommend doing this. The first is through the actual NVIDIA control panel itself. Right-click your desktop, go to NVIDIA control panel, manage 3D settings, then navigate to your program settings, find your escape from Tarkov.exe, scroll down until you find max frame rate. Change this from musical global settings off to on, and set this to your recording value. I'd recommend setting this no higher than 144. So going above that causes a lot of in-game issues. I find that the Tarkov engine itself kind of breaks above 144 frames, and honestly you're not gonna get much higher frame rate than that anyways, so I'd recommend just go ahead and setting it there for just more frame time consistency. Now the other way to do this is using a program called Rivatuner Statistics Server. I'll leave a download in the description down below. So basically all you have to do is download it, open up the program, go to the add button right here, go find where you have EFT installed. It's usually in your C drive by default. Double click on it. I already did. So it's here. Go to your frame rate limit and then type in 144. Press enter and you're literally done. Just copy all the settings I have here. Do keep in mind you do need to have this program running in the background when you do have Tarkov running in order for it to cap your frames. It's also a super useful program because you can diagnose issues through this on-screen display. When you have MSI afterburner running in the background, you can toggle different things like how much GPU usage Tarkov is using or how much RAM it's using. So it's also super useful for that as well. Another topic of concern is your actual physical hardware of your computer. Now, I actually found from upgrading from 16 gigs of RAM to 32 gigs of RAM, it actually helped to improve my overall frame rate by a lot. and decrease stutters by a lot. So if you do have the extra cash, go ahead and upgrade to 32 gigs of RAM. I know it's not very cheap, however, if you have the extra dough to spare, it helps out a lot. And same thing goes if you have 8 gigs of RAM, I would highly recommend upgrading 16 or 32, as 8 gigs is just not enough to cut in this game. There's a lot of reports of people having 8 gigs of RAM, the game just outright crashes because this game uses like upwards of 12 gigs of RAM from my experience, especially on RAM heavy maps such as like Reserve. Now, what would help alleviate this is by upping your page file. Now, to do that, you type in Windows key R, go to Control, go to System and Security, go to System, go to Advanced System Settings, go to Advanced, go to Settings under Performance, click Advanced again, and then for virtual memory, press Change, and then you'll be presented with this page below. You're going to untick Automatically Manage Page File. You're going to set your page file to be on your SSD, not your hard drive. Setting a page file to your hard drive can cause a lot of stuttering and just overall issues, just due to the nature of hard drives. Just make sure it's always set to an SSD. Now, for the value that you actually use under custom size, I'd recommend doing half your actual total RAM value. So for me, that'd be 16 gigs. So you just go ahead and initial size, maximum size, set to 16,000. Same thing if you have 16 gigs of RAM, it would be 8,000 and vice versa. So all you have to do is input those values, press set, press OK, and then press apply down here, and you'll be done. Another thing I'm going to quickly touch upon is a program called Autoruns. This is a program developed by Microsoft themselves that basically goes ahead and turns off certain services and drivers from running when you boot Windows. I'll leave the download description down below. Basically, to do this program, you go to the logon section, go through here, figure out what programs you do and do not need under startup. So for example, for me, I have IQ and Adobe Creative Cloud turned off when I boot Windows, because having these programs running in the background while you're playing Tarkov is known to cause stuttering, a lot of other issues. So I'd recommend just going ahead, doing your research, figure out what you do and do not need here, and turning that off. Now for the next tab, we're gonna go under services. Same thing for here, do the same thing you did with logon, is to turn off shit you do not need. So for example, for me, that's the Origin Client Services and Riot Vanguard Service Mode. This is also known to cause stuttering. Just go ahead and turn those off, and then yeah. Next tab we're navigate to is the driver section. This is arguably the most important section, as drivers impact your overall game performance on not only in Tarkov, but every game you have installed. Same thing with other tabs. I recommend going in here and turning off different drivers you don't need. So for example, for me, that's a Riot Vanguard. Riot Vanguard is known to cause a lot of issues with other applications running. So for me personally, when I'm not playing Valorant, I turn that off. But yeah, having Vanguard running in the background while you're playing Tarkov is known to cause a lot of stutters and overall crashes in the game, just because it's a kernel level driver, and kernel level drivers have the highest priority on your computer. I have ring 0 permission, so that means they basically control everything on your computer. And if, for example, if they're poorly coded, they can cause issues throughout your entire computer, not only in games like Tarkov, but any other applications I use, even like render applications such as like Adobe Premiere, they can cause issues in. So again, just recommend going ahead, looking at which drivers you don't need on at all times. So for me, it's these three. It's gonna look different for everybody's computer depending on which you have installed. Just make sure you do not untick things under System 32 or just any other Windows applications, as this will break your Windows install if you restart with those drivers unticked. So just be very, very careful. Do your research on which drivers you have installed and which drivers do and do not need, as this can break your Windows install. So just be very, very careful. So that's all I have to really cover for this program. This should help overall stability by a lot though. Now for the next portion of the video, we're going to be going over my in-game settings. Basically just open up Tarkov, go to settings tab, go to the game tab. So basically just go ahead and copy everything that I have here. Personally, I have always show interface elements on. That's just personal preference. I have auto RAM cleaner off, and use only the physical cores off as well. Auto RAM clean is known to cause stutters in game. It's not very well optimized, and I'm gonna have a better solution later on in this video. And use only physical cores. Basically, this disables hyperthreading for the game. If you're playing Tarkov, you're gonna want to have hyperthreading enabled. They recently pushed out a patch to actually optimize hyperthreading. It used to be bad for the game, but now it actually works properly. So yeah, just go ahead and leave that unticked. For FOV and headbutting, that's completely personal preference. However, these are the recommended settings that I've found to be the best. That's just personal preference, so just go ahead and set that to whatever you want it to be. Now for the next thing, we're gonna navigate to the graphics tab. This is arguably the most important tab. Basically set your screen resolution to your native monitor resolution. Going below that can actually cause input lag and other issues, especially if you don't have a good display-based scaler, which most monitors don't, unless you have like a BenQ. Aspect ratio, that's personal preference. I like to leave it at 16:9. So if you want to uncap your FPS, click VSync on, and then make sure it's turned off in the actual NVIDIA control panel. Personally, I leave it off as my game doesn't really reach above 120 frames anyways. But if you do like that uncapped FPS in the menus and in game, make sure that's VSync is actually on, not like I have it here. For texture quality, I turn it to high. If you have above 6 gigs of VRAM, turn it to high as well. You should be fine. Almost every graphics card these days does, so you probably just fine leave it on high. You can also turn it to high plus texture streaming. I think high plus texture streaming looks ugly as fuck. Basically, texture streaming basically puts a backlog of textures, basically makes like some of them just not as high quality as others. Basically put less strain on your GPU. At least that's what I've seen personally. It works different for different people's systems, so but yeah, I recommend just going ahead and setting it to high. So for shadow quality, I turn it to high as well to put more load on my GPU, as Tarkov doesn't really put a lot of load on your GPU by default. So this basically takes some of the load from your CPU and offsets it onto your actual graphics card. But I always recommend setting it to high. Almost everybody in this game has a CPU bottleneck over a GPU bottleneck, as this game doesn't use a lot of GPU resources. However, if you're playing in high resolution, such as 1440p and 4K, you can try and put this on low and see what your frames are, but generally speaking, if you're at 1080p, you're going to want to go ahead and set that to high. Now for object LED quality, I set that to 2, as going above that causes frame issues. Overall visibility, set that to 1000, as setting it to lower than that causes issues on large maps such as like Reserve or Interchange, where you can't see very far. However, that does cost performance, especially if you go above 1000. But again, that's personal preference. I just find no reason to go above that personally. Shadow visibility, leave that on the lowest. Anti-aliasing, you can do either set this to TAA or TAA high. TAA high puts more load on GPU, which means actually more frames in this game. Especially if you have a higher end GPU, such as a 1080 Ti or 2080 Ti, or even like 2070, 2080. I leave resampling, HBO, and all these other settings on off, as those cost a significant amount of frames. Anti-Scalper Filtering, setting it to per texture with TAA high on looks the best in my personal opinion. But again, this is personal preference, so I recommend setting this to on or per texture. Sharpness, that's personal preference. I like to leave it on 0.7, as I find going above that makes the game look ugly and costs more frames. Now for all these post-effect settings, turn these all off. They look ugly and cost frames, and actually makes it harder to spot enemies. Now for the post-effects tab, this is completely personal preference and copy what I have. However, it's hugely dependent on what your monitor looks like and your basically display-based settings. However, do note that having post-effects enabled does cost frames. I think it's like a 10 or 15 frame difference, depending on the computer. Now for the sound tab, I have Steam Audio turned off, as it's not fully implemented yet, and it's kind of buggy, and I like the ultrasound better. But again, that's personal preference. And control tab is completely personal preference. So that's all my tips for the actual in-game settings. So another thing I'd like to briefly mention is your power plan. This is very important in terms of your overall system latency and just performance and feel of the game, especially in relation to your CPU performance. So I recommend going and downloading this one. It's from another fellow YouTube tweaker known as Freethy. He's the one who gave me this personal power plan. It's basically a modified version of Bitsum's power plan, if you guys know who that is. It's basically the creator of the program known as Process Lasso. Basically like a slightly tweaked version of that. This is easily giving me the best performance in terms of latency and just overall feeling of every other game I played, including Tarkov obviously. So yeah, basically to install it, literally just go and click the link in the description down below, download it, double click it, and then simply navigate to the power options and select it here. And that's all you have to do. So yeah, I'd highly recommend doing that. Yeah. So next thing I'm going to show you guys how to do is how to clear your in-game cache. Super easy. So you basically want to go ahead and navigate to your Windows directory. Go to local disk C, go to Battlestar Games, go to EFT Live. In here, you're going to see a folder called cache. I already cleared it, so it's not going to be here. Basically, you just want to go in that folder and delete everything in there. And the next thing we're going to do is navigate to this log folder. In here, this folder is basically where EFT stores all of its crash logs. You basically want to go press Control A, delete everything in there. I already did that, so it's empty for me. But having this clearing your log is also known to help stuttering. Next thing we're going to do is navigate to the actual Tarkov launcher, go to settings, scroll down, and then press clean temp folder. This basically helps to clear out your Tarkov temp folder. Last thing we're going to do is go to your actual Windows temp folder by pressing Windows key R, %temp%. Go through here, delete everything in here. This is basically just where Windows stores all its backlogs, and such as Discord crashes or Tarkov crashes. Clearing this out can also help destroy older shader cache that can maybe causing conflict with the actual current in-game settings. So just go ahead, clear out all those aforementioned things. That should help stutters by a lot. So this is gonna be it for this video. If this helped you at all, please don't forget to drop a like, comment, subscribe. Helps out the channel a lot. So yeah, peace.